Howdy, everybody, and welcome back to the next episode of our second season of Telling the Show. We're a different kind of podcast. Denise, would you be so kind as to tell everybody why we're different?
Personality? No, I'm just joking. It's been
Yeah,
a while. We're super happy to
yeah,
be back.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
we're different because we're working and we're working on working and we're working at working better. And yeah, that stuff. But no, we're different because we're actually working in the industry and we are we want to learn just like everybody out there. So
Right, and we're trying all the time to get in, break in, and but we're still working in it in different ways. Just the screenwrite the craft of screenwriting. Talking about that, but trying to learn a little bit about it from everybody and ourselves. Which brings us to this version of our show. We were mulling over ideas, and we decided let's take 30 minutes and debate a topic and see what comes out of it. But with through the lens of screenwriting.
we should call it like hot shots or something. I don't know. If you have an idea, tell us because we don't know what to
Please.
call these short shows.
Yeah. We're happy to name it, one shots. Like in comics, they call, a one issue special a one shot. But we'll probably do a number of these, so I don't think we can call it that. But if you have any suggestions out there out on the interwebs, please feel free to let us know.
Yes.
So
So
the top
what are we talking about today?
Yeah, the topic is this. There was a recent article on a website called whattowatch.com about how are movies really getting longer, and were they really shorter in previous years? And it was in the wake of the recent release of the movie The Batman,
Hmm.
you know, and everybody was talking about how it was nearly 3 hours long, possibly the longest Batman movie ever.
It was dark.
Yeah. Unless you're counting Zack Snyder's Justice League, which
I didn't watch all that extra stuff. Did you ever see all the extra stuff?
for Zack Snyder's Justice
Yeah,
League,
yeah, yeah.
I did. I actually watched it when it was, and really, let's call it what it is. It was the fans really got that to the finish line as much as Zack Snyder did, and it was an interesting exercise. But what it really was HBO Max needing a win on its
Oh,
inception.
sure, sure, sure. Yeah.
That really, I mean, and it's not a bad thing. It was a win. But because that was a 4-hour movie that they actually broke up in 6 chunks or something like that to make it feel like you're actually watching it on like you're binging a season of a streaming
Oh, I
show.
didn't know that. Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah, it was totally constructed. You could watch all 4 hours if you wanted to, or you could break it up because it's 4 hours. I mean, um,
I don't
and
know if I can watch that reincarnation of the Flash in for 4 hours. Oh, nah, nope, nope.
yeah, I mean, I will say I personally think it's better than the Joss Whedon version, and we could debate that 6 ways to Sunday, but
We sure could.
it's bringing to mind this idea of like, okay, because we have these streamers out here in the world, the Netflixes, the Paramount Pluses, the HBO Maxes, Disney Plus, and so on. Peacock, can't forget Universal's play on that one. I mean, should movies be longer because or should they, because they're having to compete with these really quick to invest in, uh, attractive to audience kind of plays with like a 6-episode series like Moon Knight was for Disney Plus, for example. And they're not all superhero plays. There's plenty of others out there that grab an audience quick. Stranger Things, Bridgerton, Squid
Mm.
Game.
Mm-hmm.
And they get you quickly invested, and they bring you in, they suck you in, and they keep you in. And it wasn't always like that. When the streamers were first out and they had a series that was first out there, some of them were a really slow burn. I mean, it took a couple episodes to really get into it.
Like Walking Dead. I
Mm,
mean, that was slow. X-Files was slow. Twin Peaks also slow.
right.
Breaking Bad was a more recent one that like was very slow to get started. And
Yeah.
then about episode 7 or 8, you're like, oh, all right, I see where this is going. But
Right.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's all cable or broadcast television shows. And then you
Mhm.
got shows like Alias that grab you the first episode in, and you're like, they did in one episode what it takes some series like 3 seasons to do.
Yeah. When we started talking about this topic, I narrowed it down to 3 questions.
Hmm.
Being a drama writer, my scripts are routinely long. So this is something that I'm always competing with myself. Like, uh, my last drama is, I would say, about 50 pages too long. But if I take something out, I don't know what that's going to be yet, but I narrowed it down to 3 questions. One, does the length affect the story? Can you tell the same story in 20 pages as you can in 50?
Hmm.
And if so, what's different about it? Is it better? I mean, that's up for debate. Um, does it make the story more compelling? You know, is there too much exposition? Is there too much scene setting that doesn't need to be there? And then finally, does it change the effectiveness of the story? So for me in drama, I find that I tend to write a lot of exposition and setting of the scene and trying to figure out a way, because it's so dramatic, to like figure out how to express how these people are thinking, these characters are thinking, that it's a little long-winded, I'll admit it. And I have a theater background, so I mean there's nothing else but dialogue, so they tend to talk a lot. um does it make the story better? I mean I go back in it every couple of years and I read stuff that I wrote a long time ago, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of dialogue. I can cut about 20 pages out of this script.
Right.
So I mean I think it's a learned trait, but I there's something to be said about the length of a show and keeping you engrossed in that topic for an extended amount of time, no matter what it is, if it's superheroes or not, whatever that topic is, if it can keep you engrossed and, engrossed in that topic, I'm all for longer shows. So,
I think it's the right tool for the right job. But that's the thing about discovering your story as you go, whether you're in the outline stage or in the master scene script format stage, right? When you're actually on the pages, somewhere along the way, you're going to get this epiphany is like, well, first of all, of many epiphanies for screenwriters is like, what the hell am I doing here? I can't write. What the hell is
mhm,
wrong with me?
yeah.
We've had that discussion before, imposter
Mhm.
syndrome. But along the way, if you're really focused on the story, is this the right medium, right tool for the right job? So, and you brought up an interesting exercise. It's like, can you tell the same story in a shorter fashion? Like, could you, and that's happening all the time now, where people are like taking their scripts and writing trailer, scripts out of them to, as a pitch method, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So maybe that's the takeaway to learn from it, is that could you tell the same story and would it have the same impact? Even if you just do that as like an analysis or something like that, you'd be finding something new, I think, out of that. And then um you'd be hard pressed um to answer those questions honestly at first. I think every writer would have to, weave their way through being honest with themselves about their scripts, regardless.
That's an
But
interesting exercise, though, because I think that
yeah.
might illuminate some other area that maybe you've been pushing away, or
Mhm.
hiding or ignoring. So that's a really interesting exercise.
It is, because I think it would be one of those things like, because everybody, I think, at one point or another has like the longer idea and they try to adapt into a short film. It's worse if you've got the other problem where it's an idea that doesn't sustain itself over whatever, you know, length of time you want to do it. I mean, could Stranger Things have been a movie? Yeah, I absolutely think it could have been.
I don't know. I think it could have been, but I think you would have missed out on so many of these like tertiary characters that I think make that story whole.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. I think you would have missed out on all the children interaction, that group of kids. It would have been more like Goonies.
yeah,
Less, yeah.
and
Uh,
you
oh,
where you have to learn all those characters quick. But that's the
yeah.
age old debate between the television format and the film format, because one has greater character depth, but it was done that way because you had to accomplish so much with a smaller budget than you would for film. Nowadays, that's kind of out the window.
Oh, yeah, $1,000,000 an episode? Sure.
Yeah, or the visuals just look so tasty. It's like, okay, this is as good as a film. They make it feel big in certain ways, like certain like Game of Thrones, for lack of a better example, feels bigger. It feels like it's a movie like every week.
I
And they've
still
done
haven't made it past episode 3.
and a lot of people don't. I'll give you another example. Recently they've done some great work on the Star Trek series on Paramount Plus, like Strange New Worlds. I watched
Yeah.
that recently, and
It's
it
it's in my queue, man. I'm busy.
yeah, I mean, I managed to catch it last night in between like naps. So,
Yeah.
but what was great about that is they made it feel big. Like watching it the first time, you should feel like the first time I saw Star Trek, I was introduced to it by the way of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, where it was a bigger canvas, bigger
Mhm.
effects. You felt dwarfed by looking at the Starship Enterprise, and they managed to capture it in this series again. And it's an offshoot of the fact that the second season of Star Trek Discovery introduced a lot of that, and was using more cinematic techniques to do the framing and the way that it looks. So if they can do that in television or binge television or streaming, it shouldn't even be called television anymore, but that streaming episodic format, if they can do that, then really it's going to come down to who's got the strongest character investment at the end of it, I think. And that's my recent epiphany about screenwriting, is that you have to really go for the characters. You can develop everything else, but if it's not going to fit any character that you have, then well, okay, how do you reverse engineer it, which is a pain in the ass. But does your character sustain a longer story? And in the
Well,
case of
maybe that's the difference now. I mean, now that we've become so accustomed to watching things in our homes or on the go, maybe that's the difference. The difference between streaming and movies is that in streaming there's greater character content, whereas in movies you're getting like the big screen, encompassing story.
yeah, you've got a you'll always have a bigger canvas with film. I mean, but could you do the same job like the Batman? Going just fair point is that we're talking about an evergreen character that has been depicted in several versions of narrative media, even down to audio fiction. So if that's the case, then the question still becomes why this character and why on film? And it's because there's got to be something very big, very fantastic, very something you're going to want to invest your time in.
Because you could barely see it if you watched it at home because it's so dark.
There's a lot of arguments about how great Greg Fraser's cinematography is for this. And it's funny, he just came off of Dune, and that was my argument with Dune. As much as I loved that movie and I'm glad it won all these awards, but I'm looking at that book and how they had to split it up and how quickly they had to get from point to point in that movie, which they did a really good, efficient job in the screenplay of doing.
Yeah.
My problem is you don't get any time to really absorb anything, and well, the characters really didn't either. So that's a situation where it's like the Isaac Asimov Foundation series that was recently adapted for Apple TV. Sometimes it's really about that. There is this really large story that the best way you could tell it to really have the best possible impact for your audience is to actually tell it in this streaming format. I mean, sheer length alone. I mean, we've known for years that short stories make better movies than novels do, because novels could go like up to 1,000 pages or something ridiculous. Like Stephen King's The Stand belongs in a streaming format. And really, I think it recently was.
I don't know. I'm not a big Stephen King fan. I'm sorry.
That's okay. But so it just begs the question. It's like, is a movie the right canvas for this particular version of the Batman? And honestly, I think they could have had what's really going to happen is you're going to have an extra longer version exclusive to HBO Max. That's what, they could have done. They haven't done that, but they did do some, extended scenes that were deleted outside of theatrical, but they could easily have done that, reinserted it into the rest of it and made it this like chapterized version of the movie.
Not that we're talking about this, but we never talked about this movie. So I'm going to ask you anyway. Do
Sure.
you think this Batman is a different universe, is a different world than the last one we saw in Justice League?
Yes.
I do. I absolutely do. I think that's their introduction to the multiverse, but yeah.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
actually would love to see Ben Affleck and Robert Pattinson on film together. I think it would be so charismatic and sort of funny and dark and awkward, and yeah, I would love to see that.
I'll be honest with you. The closest you may get is the Flash if it ever comes to the screen right now.
No, I really don't need to see that. You know, they passed over Grant Gustin, who, in my opinion, was one of the best Flashes ever. So,
See, I'm with you right there. I mean, honestly, that version of the Flash is about the best there is, and I
yeah,
go as far back as the 1990 series. But, and they honor that, and I
they
think they've honored
do.
what Zack Snyder was doing. I have to agree with you. Ezra Miller is not the version of the Flash that I would have liked to have seen, but
Right.
since I'm not in the casting business, you know, I don't know if I'm qualified to speak to it,
Maybe
but
we
as a
should be, because
that's a
apparently we know
strong
better.
possibility. Yeah. But I'll agree with you. Grant Gustin, that guy, I mean, he draws you in. He is
Yeah.
the he embodies the best qualities of the Flash that we've come to know.
Yeah.
And honestly, I still think the version of the Flash that I've seen in my head since I was a kid hasn't been made yet. Not yet. We'll have to see. But I am looking forward to seeing Michael Keaton back in the bat suit. That is for certain.
Yeah, that's going to be so interesting.
So you'll get
Wow,
your
talk about like a third win, you know? Like he's just having like a rebound career again.
honestly, but when I recently read that he's directing and starring in the movie, his second directorial effort. But I miss his funny stuff. I really wanted to get
Yeah.
back to that
We
kick
need
out
another Mr.
funny, like,
Mom. Talk about a
you
remake.
know,
Somebody remake Mr. Mom.
somebody
Like,
did. I heard it was like a flip flop kind of version of it as a series.
oh
They tried to make
no.
it like what they did with Parenthood.
Uh well, they didn't do a good job because I never heard of it.
It came and went. So, but and that's hard to do with John Hughes kind of a story. I mean, John Hughes and the sensibilities of John Hughes in the present day, that's going to be kind of hard because we're
I
talking
got
about
the
a guy.
perfect hook.
Oh, there you
Perfect
go.
hook. Mr.
Go for
Mom,
it.
right?
Right.
Post pandemic, both parents are going back to work.
Mm.
So, you know, there you go. Somebody's got to stay at home.
Yeah, the premise isn't hard. It's not
Right.
that hard. It's like where do you find the funny in it that's relevant for today's audience? But that's another debate.
There's tons of funny out there.
Oh
Tons of
yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
I just don't write funny. I want people to cry. I want people to like, you know, rip their hearts out and go like, why?
So you're having your Jane Austen moment, which honestly, there should be as much of that as possible of every kind of story. So I have to ask, did you watch Bridgerton? Have you been invested in that? Or
No, I haven't watched it at all. I am not interested at all.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know a lot of people are shocked at that, but it's not.
Well, what's the
Pride and
longest
Prejudice was amazing, you know, and you're
the
not
Keira
gonna.
Knightley version?
Yeah, yeah, the one with Michael. What's his face? I don't remember his name, but I could find it for you.
Right. If it's the Keira Knightley version, I have to agree that is one of the most exquisite versions of that story possible. So,
but that's, you know, I don't know. I'm not going to talk about like historical romance because, well, that's a whole topic on its own.
well, and maybe we should make that a topic about like go to each genre, you know, in future versions of these kinds of parts of our show, because you know it's like I'll go into comic books and sci-fi and action, but for every one of those there's, you know, they're the kind of movies that I love where it's like the good take a look around kind of movies I like, where it gives you some perspective on soul and about something that feels a little more tangible than just, you know, explosions.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What do you think the average length script is in the US today? The average length, number of pages.
An average, okay, because we know a page a minute is like the general rule of
Right?
thumb,
Page
and I
rule of thumb. Hmm.
rule of thumb. But I guarantee you, it's a lot of readers won't even go past page 85. So 90 pages is a big max I'm hearing right now.
So the average span is 95 to 125 pages. So you're right in there. They said the median average is 114. So most scripts that are being used and bought and shot today are 114 pages.
Which tracks because
Hmm.
because one of the things that the What to Watch article was referring to was, decade by decade, what's the average?
Hmm.
2021, our average movie was 131 minutes. The longest being Spider-Man: No Way Home.
Which
No,
didn't feel long, you
actually, that
know?
wasn't the longest. The No Time to Die was actually the longest.
And I love that one too.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and we'll have to debate that one later. I'm a
Hmm.
James Bond fan, and there's some things about that I would have done differently, but that's just me. But you know what? You know what the shortest movies were?
I mean, besides animated.
No, I mean these were not animated. Actually, it's the sequels to A Quiet Place and Venom.
Oh, well, Quiet Place I knew was a very short movie. That was like what, 190 or is it 90 or 110 or something like that?
97 minutes, yeah, for
Yeah.
A Quiet Place too, yeah. But the first one was low impact too. See, to me, I love movies that like Gravity, 90 minutes, great bang for your buck. You're in, you're out,
Yes,
low commitment, had you on the edge of
absolutely.
your seat.
Mhm.
And then movies like Dunkirk. I'm not a big fan of war movies in general.
That's why you
Um,
don't like my scripts, but it's okay. I mean, it's fine.
Give me a flipping break, lady. No, but Dunkirk, what was great about it is it was only an hour and 48 minutes because a lot of war movies are very jingoistic or they're trying to be patriotic or there's a lot of bloat because they want you to really be immersed into the experience of either the rah or the war is hell. It's like there's no middle ground half the time. And while Dunkirk was war is hell and very much from the British perspective, um, it didn't it didn't belabor itself in terms of the storytelling. And again, that's a testament to how Chris Nolan was trying to be lean and efficient. However, having said that, it was really hard. He was playing with three different instances of groups: air, land, and sea, and it was really hard to follow which character was what on the land.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sea, I got. Air, I got. Air was easy. In fact, you were just following the pilot. So it's not like it was perfect storytelling, but I think if we're talking strictly on length, I mean, that one to me is like the war movie I could go to the easiest. Conversely, I don't care if The Great Escape is long. Memorial Day weekend, my happy ass is watching that because it's a fun freaking war movie.
How long do you think the new Avatar is going to be?
Oh God, it's James Cameron. I would expect no less than say 2 hours 45 minutes easy.
That's what I'm guessing too. And I
Yeah,
know we've debated about it's not my favorite movie, and I probably won't go see the second one. Um, but to switch it up a little, because
sure.
we like to help our listeners and our
Please.
followers, so I want to flip the script a little bit and say like, what should we do if our script is too long? And then also, what are some tools we can use when our script is too short? So
Wow.
let's do too long first.
Yeah.
Um, and I have a couple of things. So uh, this is from an article on what was this website? StephenFollows.com, who had a really funny article. And he goes, scripts over 120 pages tend to be ignored. So
Hmm.
don't write over 120 pages. And I was like,
Right.
okay, that's fine. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but something that's been really useful for me is the if then tool. So, like I said, my stories then tend to ramble a little bit. And then I'll go through and I'll use the if then tool, which is going through your story point by point. If A equal, well, I'm trying to think of something. So if Dorothy runs away from home, then
Right.
the tornado picks her up and brings her to Oz. Then she has to do this. So it's the if then. So if this happens, then this happens. And if you go through your story and you can align it like that, if this happens, then that happens, and it all makes sense, that will actually, I think, um, streamline your storytelling a little bit. It doesn't always work, but it's a cool tool.
It's an interesting approach because I mean, right there you're talking about structure, and most screenplays, I mean, personally speaking, I like outlining because I don't want to go to a blank screen and not know what to do, and I like having a plan. um I just have to learn that, God laughs at plans, and you're gonna have to be flexible, right? But I think in terms of length, you got to do the pre-work. I think if we're talking about something that's too long or too short, I kind of try to remember that the original script for Men in Black by Ed Solomon, 120 pages, and that movie's 90 minutes.
Hmm.
So that tells you something about how length is truly variable, because there are 90-page scripts that ended up being 2 hours long.
Well, if you look at oh my God, I just forgot his name. Quentin
I can,
Tarantino. Quentin
yeah.
Tarantino. His scripts are routinely short for the length of
Hmm.
movie, but that's because he puts so little of what you're going to see. It's all about the action, and his style of writing is very compact. There's a lot of information in a couple of words because he knows the most precise, exact use of word that will get that feeling across, that vision across. So, I mean, his scripts tend to be a little bit shorter.
Yeah, but there's a lot that's densely packed into some of the visuals, just
Oh,
the way that
sure.
the way it's all put together. But that's the lean and the most lean and efficient storytelling I tend to find is that, a lot is covered in the visual,
Hmm.
um, but just in the surrounding scene. But they tell us that the most simple stories are the easiest ones to get through in terms of length. You know, um, and a lot of them, there's some that are plenty on, big on formulaic. I mean, if you look at Speed, that movie is like, if memory
One, two, or
serves,
three.
there wasn't a third, thank God. The second one was utter crap. The first one is actually, to me, from a structure perspective, if you're a beginning screenwriter, is worth studying, because your setup is like it's one contained beginning, middle, and end. Your second
Hmm.
act is a great beginning, middle, and end, and then your third act, and it's everything is staged, and everyone remembers the bomb on a bus stuff. That's the second act, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the first act ended up being this, other complete, thing that set it all up. And the third act just, of course, closed it all out when there's just a real point of no return. So plenty of stuff to unpack there. But from a length perspective, you know, there's plenty of it that, it probably could have been cut, because it's got like secondary and tertiary characters that are just like
Sure.
caricatures more than anything else. They really don't
Yeah.
serve the plot, but they add color to the story. Now,
They sure do.
if they weren't there, if there were less characters like that on the bus, then you'd have a shorter movie, perhaps.
I wonder if this script, the actual script, not the shooting script, but I wonder if it follows the roller coaster with page numbers. You know what I mean?
Like every so many pages an action beat or something like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Let me see if I can find it, I'll post it on our social
Yeah.
media. Um, so now that we talked about too long, what are some ideas to help our friends if our script is too short?
You know what? I thought about this a little bit, because in some of our Logline Thunderdomes, I had a couple of ideas that I thought could have been longer, but
Hmm.
really were like intentionally, short from the get go, because they could have been just scenes. But if you're going to expand them, then there's got to be more to your world than just that scene. And if it's driven from those characters, what else are they doing? So the first thing I would do is go to the characters. And okay, so if you've got these two characters in your one central part of your story and they're in conflict, then what are the ramifications of that conflict? Like, almost, it's kind of like a pebble in a pond. Where do the ripples hit? you know
Right.
so what
Right.
are the impacts of their conflict? Try to look at, okay, because using your if then model, if they have this conflict, then how does it impact their families? Like sometimes it's easier when you're talking about if two people, are married but not to each other and cheating on people. Well, you're destroying minimum like at least 4 people's lives. And if there are children involved, that expands exponentially. Then the rest of your extended family, and then your friends. Now, that's a horrible way to, example from a storytelling perspective. But conflict can always have impacts and ramifications. And your if then statement I thought was brilliant, because it always feels like there's a little bit of a great way to watch out for plot holes using that tool, because then you
Sure.
don't lose anything. But then you have to, that's another way. If you're trying to tie in all those loose ends, are you losing like your brevity? Are you, and the key to watching out for your, length is making sure there's enough satisfying moments that come out of your conflict and the ramifications of that. Do you have enough characters? Sometimes too many characters really dilutes your soup, as it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest problem with the recent Doctor Strange movie.
I haven't seen it yet.
I'm not going to spoil you. I
Thank you.
just think there's a lot of characters in it, and it still manages to be satisfying. But other films aren't so lucky, especially if we're talking going back to the Batman thing. It's like you've got 3 hours, and they made some pretty, indelible prints on you, and not everybody loves the Batman in this one in terms of character depth. Whereas like, well, okay, it could be worse. You could have had too many characters that you don't give a damn about, that are not even truly from the comics, as in the case of Batman and Robin and Batman Returns. And those are just, to me, Batman Returns is horribly bloated in many ways, and high on metaphor and style, but really low on substance. Your title character barely has any personal stakes in the movie. And so it really comes back to, I think, your characters and your conflict, and having enough of them and enough ramifications that it serves your plot.
I also think something that might be useful is, if depending on what screenwriting software you're using, there's lots of like templates and examples, and there's like stick it notes, and like there's all sorts of tools that are available to help you reach that 125 page goal. So you just like, you actually have to spend some time, which like, how much time do we have to sit and go through this entire software package? But there are
Right.
tools in there, but you just got to spend some time and work with it. And I no, this is, if Final Draft wants to sponsor us, that would be super cool.
We keep joking about that.
I know we do. They haven't reached out with that $1 million yet, but I'll even take free software. They have a lot of tools that will
They
help
do.
you reach that extended page count, especially if your idea is like, if you have a specific goal for your story, the tools that they have included in that program will help you like space it out, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool stuff. So.
And you're right. I actually did a little digging into this, because I recently did some changing up of what kind of computer equipment I have. And here's Chris's tech tip for the week. If you bought an iPad Pro recently, like the most recent 5th generation one, and you're worried that Final Draft Mobile doesn't have all the bells and whistles you need, because it doesn't have the outlining features that the main software, as you would use on a desktop, would. And this is assuming you're even into Mac. Most people are, they're mainly PC on this. So I do recommend, as Denise is mentioning, going through, because you can do outlining through like The Writer's Journey by Chris Vogler, or Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. It has like 5 or 6 different templates you can follow, and it'll really help you out. It's all encompassing. And considering right now it's not a subscription price, that's really just the best thing. It's the best possible tool anywhere, really, for a writer. Now, if you do your own outlining, there's other tools that are probably less expensive out there, maybe, but Final Draft is an industry standard for a reason. And that's me, wanting, really pushing for that kickback you mentioned, Denise. But
that's right. It'll
but
happen one day.
It will. But if you're on an iPad Pro and you're not liking the app that exists out there, hang on to your hats because to reference Oz again for you. The iPad Pro is an M1. The most recent version is an M1 chip-based computer, for lack of a better description. And because it's got Apple Silicon, there's a new operating system for iPad on the horizon that everyone's, right now it's just rumor, but it's possible that M1 native apps, and the most recent version of Final Draft is an M1 native app. What that means is that if you have an iPad with M1, that means you could theoretically have the same app that's on your desktop on your iPad Pro. So let's say you're on your iPad Pro and you want to outline your script. It's possible. I don't know that it's going to happen. Final Draft will have to tell us in due time, but if that happens, that could be cool. It could be really cool to be able to outline and use it the same way as you would on a MacBook Pro or on any other PC laptop or on your desktop. And then with an iPad Pro, you can go straight from that to storyboarding, because you can draw on these things, right? Hell, you could film on an iPad Pro. I wouldn't recommend it. That would be really challenging to compose your shots that way. But there's a world out there of, to make it all easier and even more exciting and more fun to write and come up with your scripts and to even put together pitch decks using an iPad. So, as the future portends great possibility.
That was all. It sounded like Klingon to me. I have no idea what you were talking about.
Yeah, and most
Apple,
of our listeners,
Apple, M1, Apple,
blah blah blah, yakety schmackety. And most writers are like, in my day, we used a pencil and a notebook pad.
I still write. I write and I use actually index cards and sticky notes or a dry erase board, depending on where I am.
See, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it's useful, it's practical, and you don't need any of the bells and whistles. But for me, I like the bells and whistles because,
especially if you're like a visual person, seeing the story points and how they connect together is sometimes better than seeing it on your screen.
That's true, but I will say that there are times when my thoughts are so much faster than my hands in terms of typing or handwriting.
Oh my. Preach. I still would like someone to make a program that I can connect to my brain and I can just think the movie and it'll translate to a script, because that would be amazing.
See, and that's the closest thing, because now with text to speech, you can do that. On like, I can't speak to PC, but on the Apple side, I know you can do that. And I'm going to try out those features because it'll work for any word processor, including Final Draft. There's a text-to-speech function in Final Draft. So
yeah, last time I spoke with them, they were working on it for the PC, but I mean, you can just attach Dragon Speak, or there's lots of free ones online.
There are.
Yeah, and
you
go. I have found something.
It's so worth it to really think about, take advantage of the tools that are out there to really enhance it. Do the practical. I mean, everyone should handwrite their stuff. I mean, George Lucas did, and plenty of other writers back in the day did.
Mm-hmm.
But at a certain point, if you want to get to your thought faster, and get it out of your head faster, there's nothing like, the benefits of using the technology around you. If you've already got a phone, you have a way to write a screenplay.
You sure do.
So, I mean, the tools are not the problem. It's just, it's the taste, it's the decisions that you make in the storytelling, and has the same effect on your length. It's like how you choose to tell the story is going to be probably the biggest determining factor in what kind of story you tell and how long it is. I mean, all right, if you're doing War and Peace, that's going to take you 4 movies to get that novel done. But if you're doing something like The Godfather, oh man, you want to talk about a masterclass on adaptation. I'm not a fan of that movie as a consumer, but there is a great book that goes over how Francis Ford Coppola broke the book down and adapted it into for production once he got the screenplay.
What was interesting about that, I am actually not a big fan of that series either, but when I was at Coppola Vineyards, it all goes back to wine with me. But it's
There you
okay.
go.
Um, they had a lot of the script pages there that you could just peruse through, and he had so many notes from the
Oh
books
yeah.
in the columns and in the white space, like, page 62 of book, of the book, I want to get this feeling from this scene, you know and there's something to be said about that, because books can actually make you feel a certain way, but translating that physical reaction to a visual emotion is challenging. And that's the craft.
It is, and it comes down to your choice of genre.
Sure.
Like action, you're wanting to get some adrenaline, people.
Hmm.
Um, Science fiction, you're wanting to astound them and also make them think a little bit. Um, and that's just going to come naturally from the subject matter you choose. But in terms of going back to the idea of length, which is our big topic, let me ask you this. Um, do you want to get lost in a story, and have it immerse you and make you feel something? And do you think length is the determining factor on that?
I think in, you can become engrossed in a movie 100%, no matter the length, if it's done well.
Well,
If
yeah,
there's
that's
something that's
ideal.
gonna connect you to it, if you're connecting to the character or the struggle or the story, or, you know, even, I mean, and that doesn't have to be like a drama specific thing. It could be a comedy, I'm trying to think of like a comedy that I loved recently. The first one that comes to mind, I know it's a little old, Bridesmaids.
Oh,
Like,
that's still a good one. Yeah, I
it's still a
mean,
good one, but I felt for her, because like I've been in that same situation, not, crapping in a bridal salon, but I mean, like, I've been in that situation, like, you're just expected to be this person all the time, and maybe that's not who you are, you know? Um, and so, like, even though that was a short movie, I still got sucked in because I was like, I had empathy for her, you know? Um, so yeah, I personally don't think length matters. However, I think for dramas, historical dramas specifically, I think if you don't have, they can't be like 90 minutes, because I feel like you're not doing the historical part of it justice.
I challenge that with the idea that you could, but it would have to be on a very focused, like a laser focused event in history. It couldn't be, um,
Like,
it
you
could,
can't do the whole Civil War, but you could talk
oh
about
God.
1 week.
Or you could talk about one of the, I mean, even a battle takes longer
Yeah.
to tell. Like the Alamo, um, depending upon which version of the Alamo movie you want to see, because there's two, there's no way you can tell that story in a short amount of time. However, you could theoretically talk about one of the minor efforts in a war. Like World War II has given us no end of movies,
Mhm.
some of them too long to even fathom. But you could probably do a 90-minute one about a reconnaissance mission that goes wrong, because I start thinking, I go to war movies first because in terms of trying to tell a story with length. And it still comes down to, how do you invest in it? Das Boot is probably one of the better war movies in terms of investing in you and then sucker punching you with the ending, because that's just reality crashing in. Um, but comparatively, war movies where it was, trying to make fun of a situation within the context of war. I Was a Male War Bride with Cary Grant, if you want to go classic. So there's just, it comes to varying degrees. But I think you can do it, but it just can't be the whole war, right? You couldn't do the World War II in 90 minutes.
Not very well.
Yeah, not well, not well.
Well,
Oh
and
shoot.
that old adage is true, like, we're talking about length, but unless your first 10 pages are great, nobody's gonna read the rest of it anyway. So,
Right. I mean, I can just imagine trying to put together Saving Private Ryan, because that's a hard movie to watch. Especially um, um, storming the beach at Normandy. That entire
Hmm.
sequence is just the most horrifying that war ever could be on
And
film.
think about it. We should go back and read those first 10 pages.
Yeah, yeah. Especially like any one of our favorite movies.
Yeah.
How does that work?
How does it
And
hook you in?
right,
Because it's a great blueprint. Go back to movies that you love and do your research, you know?
yeah. See, I think it'd be harder to pull off something like Alien nowadays, because that's kind of got a slow burn in those first 10 pages.
Hmm.
You're really driven more by the art design of that movie, and that's the hook as a film goer. But if you're writing the script, your hook really, you know, I think that hook probably had to be somewhere else. Obviously, from a script perspective, it was a B movie at that, as it was conceived originally. Um but some people would probably try to do that same thing and make the mistake of making the chestburster sequence the first thing that happens in the movie.
Right. Right.
And
I mean,
that,
and we didn't talk about the movie goer because um we tend to write for the people that are going to come see it.
yeah,
So, that has a lot to do with it. And I don't want to say anything negative, but there are certain genres of film where people are not going to sit. I mean, people can barely put their phones down for 10 minutes and you're going to ask them to put their phone away, and focus on something for an hour and 45 minutes, and I think you're just asking too much. So, um, you
well,
know,
that's fair, but that kind of ADHD is being fed by that phone. To be perfectly honest, I think we're all suffering. I think the whole of the world is suffering ADHD. Every last one of us, thanks to the cell phone.
so put the phone down and go see a movie.
Or read a book. Or read a book on your phone. I mean, that's perfectly fine, as
There
long
you
as you
go.
can
That's fine.
turn off all the texts and email messages and stuff like that. It really is hard to turn it off. I mean, I don't think at one point people started thinking, as soon as there was like a digital way to read books, that the printed page would go away. And I don't think it will ever, because there are going to be people who want to distance themselves from the technology just long enough to be able to get invested in something. And for all my, tech tipping, as I did in this episode, I'll even tell you right now, I've got a copy of Ready Player 2 that I'm ready to read. And it's physical. It's not a digital copy.
Oh.
So,
Well, I stopped carrying hard book. I mean, I read hard books at home.
mm,
Um, I am usually now doing digital because I travel.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm reading a hard book right now. I read for an hour and a half on the plane today and it was delightful.
Which book are you reading?
I'm reading Mayor Pete's book.
Oh, rock on.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, I know
No.
it's nothing like thrilling, but it's pretty enjoyable, and learning more about him is delightful.
Well, honestly, I mean, the most entertaining books. Now, here's something screenwriters can learn from. Um, I think they used to be called dime store novelists, but I don't think that's really a fair description of them anymore. But you look at the Gregory McDonald's Fletch books,
Hmm.
or Janet Ivanovich, the books you can pick up and read, get invested quick. You're in, you're out. You'd probably take 3 nights to read them, right?
Yep.
And they're not exceptionally dense in some way, but they're entertaining. And that's honestly, you know, there's something to be said for analyzing that, taking a look at that as a screenwriter and finding out, okay, how did they hook you?
Yeah.
Did the length matter? And, how did you invest them? So I think a real takeaway here is it comes back to the basics of screenwriting. If forget the length, even though we're probably going to be up against, you know, an industry that's going to be constantly competing against itself in terms of like film versus binging, which is basically a new version of movies versus television, as that became in like the 50s and 60s. Um, it's the same debate over and over again, but it's still going to come back to, do you give a damn about what you're watching?
and you never know till you try. So, personally, I've had screenplays that I thought were just meant to be screenplays until somebody said, this would make a really great limited series
Mm,
if you break it down like this. And then you can add to this part of the story. And I never thought about it. So, you never know till you try. And if it doesn't work one way, try it another, because it might open up new windows for you that you haven't explored before.
exactly. Right tool, right job. Right now, I'm thinking about how to take advantage of the audio fiction medium in such a way that we can craft a real interesting thriller, and do it as a low commitment kind of thing. Like you could listen to 10 minutes of it at a time and be done and still have it be investment. So there's something to be said for focusing on the length
Hmm.
as an exercise in how brief can I be? Because that's really tough, even for short film writing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I've been working on my short for what, 2 years now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
And what I've read is really visually descriptive and gripping. So especially for the content matter.
thank you.
You're welcome.
You know how I'm all about quotes. So I actually found a quote that was good for this episode.
Roger that. I think we've come to a great place in our discussion where a quote would be so apropos.
And it's by one of my favorite filmmakers, Alfred Hitchcock,
Hmm.
who actually has a say on this subject matter. He says, the length of a film should be directly related to the endurance of the human bladder.
Which is freaking brilliant because I tested that during the movie Contact. Because I broke my cardinal rule, and that's a long movie in and of itself, right?
It
This
is,
was years
yeah.
ago. But I made the cardinal sin of drinking a 44-ounce soda and pretty much finishing it by the time the trailers were done.
Oh
And it
no.
really didn't kick in until the damn jump to the third act. So I spent 30 freaking minutes holding my bladder till the last possible second so I wouldn't miss anything. And it's funny, 20 seconds you miss by finally saying, no, I can't. I got to go. I ended up with a migraine from holding it, actually.
Oh man.
It sucked. I exaggerated. It probably wasn't a migraine because I would have been doubled over in pain or whatever. And all I missed was just a one sentence speech from Matthew McConaughey, near the end of the movie. So couldn't wait till the
Uh
damn credits.
yeah. What was I just watching? It wasn't Batman. Morbius.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
watching and I was like, you know what? This is one movie that I think could have been shorter.
Or should not have existed. I don't know. I mean, the
I
reviews on
I
that thing have not
still
been
like
great.
him. I still like him. I'm sorry. I think he's talented. I think I expected so much more visually, and yeah, I
Mm.
expected more.
I just wonder where they're going by trying to get all these characters like Venom and Morbius into film. There's supposed to be a Kraven the Hunter movie now. I mean,
Well,
I think there's a
they
whole
led up to like that it's going to be Spider-Man and
the
Venom
Sinister
and
Six.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm down for
So
that. But they got to fix those visuals. I don't know what happened. I'm like, why does that look so awful?
yeah, I mean, you could blame it on the pandemic or lack of money. It could be any number of those things. But
It's Jared Leto. They made their money back when he showed his shirt. When he was on screen without a shirt, they made their money back.
okay, so I guess that's a particular draw. Um, I thought the character and the trailers were interesting. I haven't seen it, but to me, there wasn't enough there that, it's like, I think it's going to draw some unfortunate comparisons to Blade already.
I mean, it's
Which,
very formula. It's extremely formula. But I mean, I was still entertained. There were things about it while I was watching it that took me out of the moment.
mm,
One of the things was no spoilers, but whenever they would bare their teeth, they would do like that classic vampire like thing, and I was
like
like, oh god, this is
the,
like
The
6
Hiss.
times I was, yeah, The Hiss, and I was like, "Nope, nope, every time."
Well, see, that's because we've had like years of different vampire movies and varied
Mhm.
iterations, which, by the way, I don't like the romanticized version of a vampire. Give me Blade any day of the week and twice on Sunday. To me, that's a kick-ass vampire movie.
So you didn't like
Um,
Angel?
Angel was interesting. I hate the main title music personally, but but if that's the worst it is, then I guess it's not that bad. But no, I mean, I thought that was it wasn't necessarily romanticized. It was a very strange and unusual show. That much I remember. Um, but it's like for every Interview with a Vampire and Twilight, I'm like really hoping for like another Blade, or and not its sequels, but the original, or even go into old and bad, like to have fun on a Friday night with a bag of popcorn. Blackula. I
Mm,
love that movie. It's just, I
yeah.
think from my perspective, as a kid, it kind of freaked me out a little bit, but I saw
Mhm.
it at a time when I was kind of getting past all that. And it's a comedy to me, actually, at this point. Um, or even the old Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee Hammer films with vampires in them. Give me The Curses, or Bram Stoker's Dracula, for all its, very unusual, romanticism, is still at its heart a good vampire movie, like traditional, dyed in the blood. Sorry, forgive the pun. Vampire movie where and Blade just is a great kick-ass action spin on it. I think the problem is that it's a genre that needs a reinvention. Just like I know right now the Western is getting a reinvention on streaming television, and horror is even getting a reinvention. I mean, The
Yeah.
Purge is probably one of the coolest ideas for a horror movie I've ever seen.
I just think it's like we've seen it.
Yeah.
You know
It's
what I
hard to
mean?
see, and that's the other trick to, whether we're talking about length or, going anything and writing for somebody to actually enjoy or read. Um, the competition is fierce, and so really we're writing against somebody who's read it all or seen it all, or and has no sympathy for whether or not the story means something to us. And that's the challenge of selling a screenplay. So
And
got to be inventive.
there are rules, there are industry standards,
Hmm.
that we have to work around until you become a Coppola or Tarantino or a Whedon. I mean, the
Hmm.
rules are there for a reason. And until you learn the rules, you can't break them.
Right, but I think the other side of it is don't be so slavish to them. As long as there's some bit of logic and something satisfying about a character, like if you've got your if then statements in the right place, or you've got some
Sure.
great character investment, you know, the story should eventually tell itself.
Absolutely. I don't think we disagreed or agreed on anything.
We have a hard time debating. I guess if we agree on Grant Gustin, I think we're going to agree on pretty much almost anything at
Right?
this point. That's good.
Tell me
It
about it.
it's not. There's no drama here if there's no conflict.
I would
So
really like to see an Arrow movie with Stephen Amell.
you know what? I didn't watch that last season. I kind of got burnt out, but I do think that they did a great take on
Mhm.
that character. It was basically
Yep.
a weekly Batman Begins, which I thought was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and I honestly, if I had to do an HBO Max series pitch, I'd ask Christopher Nolan's brother Jonathan to come in and write the follow-on that comes after The Dark Knight Rises, and see what happens with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, not
Mm.
as Batman, but as that universe's version of Nightwing.
I would also like to see, there was the smattering of this talk, like many years ago, but Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Channing Tatum doing a modern retelling of Guys and Dolls.
Oh, they'd both kill it.
Yeah, they would absolutely both kill it, and I would love to see it, even
I,
as like a one night thing. Somebody record it and show me it.
there's something to be said for, I think because I know your background is theater, and I know I have my opinions. This is the only time we've had a real conflict, is talking about West Side Story and whether or not it should have been made. It makes the question, if they're gonna do a movie like that and relativize an original musical,
I don't
let's
think
see.
they would actually make it different from the original movie version. Um, I think it would still be set in that time period. I don't think they would make it. They couldn't change it very much, but you
Well,
could. I mean, there's a cool way to do it, but
well, I wouldn't suggest that of Guys and Dolls, but I would suggest it of something like A Chorus Line. That's one of those that can be timeless because all those characters are facing so many different dilemmas as an ensemble piece. And that's one of those where, telling it with a modern lens, updating a few of those things would be interesting. Just as a possibility. I don't see it existing very well on the big screen anymore, but I do think that there's some value in bringing that to one of the streamers. I was commenting.
well, musicals are actually making money in the theater.
I'm not surprised.
In the Heights, West Side Story.
Are we sure? Because I've heard they didn't do all that great.
No, yeah, they did very well.
That's interesting. Yeah. I'd have to check the box office numbers, but I was commenting the other day that Paramount Plus is missing out on an opportunity on some of their most, indelible franchises by not trying to expand on Grease. And so here's my pitch. You don't you don't remake it, you don't do a sequel. You do a series called Rydell High and make it a mini series where each version of it, I mean, the first two Grease were all about the 50s and 60s, right? Or mainly 50s. And now, so let's see what happens when you put Rydell High in the context of the late 60s during the free speech movement or the civil rights thing. Put them in the 70s during the disco era. That's basically Saturday Night Fever, but you get my drift. And then put it in the 80s, then the 90s, then the 2000s, the 2010s. See what happens in each decade. Take 6 episodes each season to do that and see what happens. Does the idea
the musical?
Well, right. I mean, that's been done in that context, but but what was unique about Rydell High and those times and those places and those people? There's always some group, some generation that comes along in one institution that is unique and colorful and vibrant. And does the idea of a love like Danny and Sandy exist and keep existing through time?
It does not.
Well, I think it can. I think it can't be the exact same thing, but it's got to be different versions of it, and make that the point of the series.
I don't know. Maybe.
Because the whole point of Grease was it was a Valentine to a bygone era.
True. The second one was interesting.
The second one was an excuse to put Michelle Pfeiffer on a ladder.
On a ladder. Cool rider.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Arguably one of the only things that works about that movie, but Michelle Pfeiffer's made better movies than that. So.
Well, I think we've
exhausted this
our topic. Yeah. This is some 30 minutes, but we had a lot to say. So.
Yeah, I don't think this was 30 minutes at all at this point.
Not at all.
But thank you everybody for listening, and I think this was a great conversation, and we're gonna have to pick it up again.
Absolutely. Don't forget, you can reach us email at tellingtheshow@gmail.com. Social media, so there's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, all at Telling the Show. And we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely. Just keep on talking to us. And you know what? Let's put this topic out for debate with our audience on the socials. Like, if you agree that length is a factor in your writing, how is it? Tell us how that is a factor in your writing. Do you dismiss it? Do you agree like we do that it's more about your characters and your bladder perhaps than than anything to do with your actual story? Let's see some debate about that. Healthy debate, some civilized debate, but keep the conversation going out there and tell us what you think.
Yeah, I will create a poll. So Vote in the poll.
Yeah, and maybe we talk about the results on the next show.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, everybody have a nice evening and or morning wherever you are in the world, and
Wherever
please,
you are.
whatever you do, be safe and get entertained.
And wash
keep
your hands for at least 20 seconds.
And keep writing after you wash your
Yes.
hands.
After
Dry
you
them.
wash your hands.
Yeah, dry them before you actually go back
You
to
don't
whatever
want
you're
to
writing
type
on.
with wet hands. That makes the key slippery.
Yeah, it's a shocking affair.
All right. Until next time.
Until next time, folks.